All good?
Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for inviting me to the Monash Actuarial Student Society. My name's Mike Callan. I was an academic here for a short time, about 4 years. I set up the Part 2 program here, the control cycle and the asset liability management course. I've got about 30 years experience as an actuary. Most of my time was spent in Europe and Germany, Luxembourg, the UK and places, etc., in a wide variety of roles. I ended up I had about 60 actuaries reporting into me, so I was head of actuary for a large UK bank. Moved to Australia for family reasons, etc. Did a few jobs around here in various places like Deloitte and AMP, came to Monash, and 3 years ago I moved to the Actuaries Institute, which I'm sure you've all heard about. So my job now, I'm the head of education for the Actuaries Institute. So I'm the person who's going to put you through a lot of pain in your future career as you battle through those exams. Okay? Now, we did communicate to Maz that we weren't really planning to do any presentations this semester. We wanted to do next semester as some new marketing material is being developed to help show you what careers there are, etc. Well, I agreed to do so because I felt that I'm going to experiment a bit on you today. So you might get more bored than usual, and I can tell because this is very unusual seeing you. So for the last 3 years when I teach over Zoom, and I don't see anyone. So it's nice to see some faces. Okay. So you can interrupt at any time with questions. If you say a question from the floor, I'll repeat it so the people on Zoom can hear it. And I just admit some person there. And if you're on the Zoom meeting and you put a question in, if one of the organisers can just point out what the question is. Okay. So a fairly brief. I was told about 30 minutes. I'll probably take a bit longer than that. So let's do the traditional ones. Why would you want to be an actuary? So this is all the material that's going to be rewritten. I picked up. So this is a bit of a back. What can you do? Okay? So you become a professional. That's vitally important. So it's very different being a professional than somebody working on your own doing some technical skills. Being part of a profession means there's a body of people designed to help you. There's about 5,200 members in the Australian Institute. I'll show you some stats later on. About 4,000 of them work in Australia. Worldwide, there's probably about 100,000, maybe a bit more, actuaries these days. It's a very small profession. It has a lot of power beyond its size. We influence governments around the world in terms of saving. Traditionally, we've influenced governments in terms of savings, pensions, retirement, insurance, car insurance, etc. These days, governments are asking for us to do a lot more. You find a lot of health services asking actuaries to get involved to do long-term projections. So all that sort of stuff that you study around these LXs and QXs and withdrawal rates, etc., actually people make a lot of money out of that in the future. So it's not just an academic thing that you're doing. There's a few people here explaining what they do. I will show you later, probably 50 to 60% of our members are in traditional areas, but they're all growing. Anybody heard of companies like Quantium? Yeah, a few of you. Yeah. So there's lots of new companies popping up, which are looking for highly numerate people, often with actuarial skills. It's our job at the Institute to convince those employers to employ you and for you to continue with us as we take you through the future exams. So I've talked to some of these things here. Thought leadership. I would say probably about 10 to 20% of actuaries are heavily involved with us. The next 50% semi-involved, and the bottom 10%, 20% are quite happy to do a job in an organisation and to be left alone. But it depends. It's up to you and how much of your intellectual curiosity you want to take on, not next year or the year after, but for the next 40, 50 years of your life. Okay? The actual profession gives you an opportunity to continue to learn. You might be sick to death of learning, you're probably more sicker of doing examinations than anything else. Right? So there is some more exams you'll have to do post-university, but you will have to have the mindset that you want to learn continually throughout the rest of your life. Look, there's huge areas where we're entering into, but what you have to remember is you come at things from a useful perspective, but you're not going to be an expert in everything. Okay, so if you want to be an actuary in climate change, that doesn't mean you can get up in front of an audience and tell them what to do about climate change. You'll have to learn to work with a lot of people with a lot of different skill sets. Okay, so part of your journey of going forward, it's not just the technical side of things, it's more the soft skill side of things. How to communicate with other people, how to influence other people, and how to work with other people. And these are skills we take you through as you come into the Institute. Where do we work? Well, I mean, this is saying, obviously trying to convince you data analytics is the big thing, which is a big thing. There's other things around fintech and insurtech. A small number of people do education. There's a growing number in government. What we try to do is we try to influence various bodies that they need actuaries. But what we really need is actuaries who've got entrepreneurial skill sets to go into those environments, to create opportunities. And once they're in an environment, people understand the skill sets that you are learning at university and post-university, bring them in, and then the demand for actuaries increases. So that's what we're seeing at the moment. As people understand what you do, outside of the traditional areas, we're seeing more people value your skills. So what I'm trying to say there is there may not be jobs in the traditional areas, but there should be lots of jobs for highly new people going forward in the workforce. Do you recognize these? No, I should have taken off the names and seen how many you recognize. Anybody any good at brands? Yeah? Okay, that'd be a bit of a boring game if it was just actuarial brands and accounting brands. Basically, the thing about that slide is a wide choice of opportunities. Any questions on the world of work? Any obvious things I've missed out? The fact that you don't get paid very well? Is that useful? Yeah. I don't know. Any questions? Yeah. Can you think of something? Now, if I had a sales audience here at your age, right, there'd be 1,000 questions. But I get actuaries, you don't answer any. What you have to learn is that when you go into the workforce, they don't want you to do what you've just done. Right? You're boring. You're not asking any questions. You've been given the opportunity to ask something. Right? The employer has 10,000 people to look at. They want to find the ones best. So next time you're asked for any questions, be brave. Put your hand up. Okay? I might be mistelling the story. Okay, so that's fine. There's a guy at university I won't mention. He retired when he was about 35 because he used his actuarial training to make a ton of money in forestry. Right? So it just shows you can, if you're thinking laterally and out of your skill set, there are opportunities to be made elsewhere. Okay, so I remember when I was here, I used to ask sort of the high school students to turn up, or even the first year control cycle one, sorry, to play a game about pricing the cost of marketing campaigns. So, and that one was around, it came from, in the mid-1990s, a UK company that made biscuits, the equivalent of Arnott's, if you like. And they had this campaign that if you bought 25 different types of biscuits and sent in the wrappers at the time, you get your money back. And so people thought that's a great idea. But then you start to realize it's like an actuarial problem. You can use your actuarial skill set to price that one. It's a general insurance contract. So anything that involves long-term future uncertainty, you can use the knowledge you have to price it. So don't constrain yourself to think it's just that car insurance or something. Think wider. It's like how would you price satellite insurance? it's there. You've got a good example. You've got next to no data. So how do you use judgment? So there's lots of opportunities to use your brain. Okay. And
like you said, you would be the one that would put these students to a lot of pain. Would you really?
now they're putting themselves by not doing enough work. What we find is, I'm going to go talk you through the postulations. How normally do this is normally we just do some math. Okay? But I want to let you know what you're going to do. It's a very new world you're entering into, but it's similar to what you already know about. That's what we're trying to do.
We're trying to create less pain.
We are trying to create less pain. I'll give you an example. I took the video read earlier on. When I sat the economics exam, you probably sit in the first year, I think. I had a correspondence course for the Institute of Actuaries in the UK. And the textbook turned up with the course notes. Lesson 1 was read chapters 1 to 17 of the textbook. That was the extent of the support we used to have. Okay? Very different world. Yeah, come take a seat. This is the program that the ones in purple you sort of recognize as what you're doing in your undergraduate studies. The one in the middle, the top two ones, the control cycle and the data analytics principles, is what you'll learn in Monash, or if you're in a different university. The control cycle one is trying to take you from the world of applied maths into the world of business, because let's extend your example. What's really complicated in the business world? What sort of maths do they do? Most people in business world. But don't forget, they're very clever people. They do lots of great things, much wider things that we can do. In terms of maths, they're good at adding up and taking away. Right? And the variance is the difference between two numbers. And that is it. That's pretty much the extent of business maths to most people you come across. Now, you're going to come in as mathematically trained, and they don't care about your math skills. They presume you have math skills, and where you need to interact with them is in whatever your home language is, whether it's German, English, Mandarin, whatever language you want to choose. You have to tell a story. Right? So the control cycle tends to shock people because we take you from the comfort of doing simple manipulation. Right? Although you're getting much wider education experience these days. We're talking this morning about Hamza talking about doing some app for a life insurance model. Okay, great ideas. So taking you away from that algebra, you go to the control cycle, and then it really is, well, you tell me what the story is. Okay? And what I find from teaching that one and the latest subjects is a lot of us didn't invest enough time and energy in learning to write and communicate. Okay? And that shows up. And all the people who do well in work are those that can communicate. And when I say well, you can scrape by on $200,000 a year if you like, but the ones that hit the $1 million and stuff, they're the ones who can communicate and tell the story and interact with other people. They're the skill sets that will set you apart. Then you come to us to do the ALM course. We took that from the university. This is an odd subject in the sense that it vacillates between the universities and the institute every 5 to 7 years or so. And I don't know why it has historically. This course introduces you to the types of investments that all actuaries should know about. The fact that as an actuary, when we look at something, we think about what the promise that has been made to people first, the liability. That's fundamentally what we see. People don't invest assets on their own. They invest assets that needs, whether it's future needs or whatever that is. So we take you on the course to understand that relationship, but we also use that course to help you understand that people don't often talk to each other in an intelligent, sensible way. And the reason they don't is because they have a different set of beliefs. And the investment course is a great example of that. I'm sure some of you have heard of behavioral finance. Some of you have heard of fundamental analysis. Some of you have heard of technical analysis. These are different approaches to solving problems. But people who believe in technical analysis don't believe in the fundamental analysis, who may not believe in behavioral finance. And those people live in different paradigms. And so part of the course is to help you realize that as an actuary, it's not your job to live in a paradigm. It's your job to stand outside from that paradigm and have that holistic view where you can oversee a problem, because your job is to advise decision makers as an actuary. And what you need to do is to advise them on what a model is, what's the implications of a model, and where that model can go wrong. So there are alternatives. So we're not staging a model, we stand back from things. Okay? And it's quite a tricky skill to pick up, because everybody you talk to will know this is the way to do it. You have to break out of that cycle. Then we go on to, we do this course called Communications Modeling and Professionalism. We expect 90 to 95% of people to pass that first time. It's tested by assignment. You do a written assignment and presentation. And in there, we teach you how we would like you to write up a spreadsheet. We teach you how to create arguments. We teach you how to set out a report, because we use all those skills in the later subjects. The fellowship ones, or the well, yeah. Well, I suspect that on principles, for those two are taught in university, I suspect the principles one will have quite a high execution rate, because it's still. I don't know what your experience is. It's probably too early to say, but that one you'd expect a lot of people to get that. What's your final something you have to get? 70. Yeah. That's not doable. The control cycle, there's a lot of factors. Sometimes people are not ready for it. Sometimes English is the first language. Often they haven't sort of switched over their mindset into that. It does vary by university. You know, I mean, whatever figure is, you'd expect half the people, if not more, to get to that level, I suppose. I don't know. A bit more than that here, I think, these days, about that level. You can't tell.
It's always hard to tell, isn't it? How much work people put into what they've done, how much they understand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No distribution.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. So there's we've got questions coming in.
We can read the questions on the chat.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, to apologise for the people there. Just remind me, because I'll forget in 2 seconds. Fine. Look, the CMP is fine. ALM, I would hope 75% pass for that one. Again, it's if they do the work involved. It's a bit of a selection one on there, because you've done the control cycle, application principles, less people will continue to do the ALM, because they're more into it. Oh, brilliant. Yeah. So the question is, if you leave university with the foundation level, you go into something like data analytics, what's the incentive to continue to do the rest of the actuary program? That's the question I'm grappling with at the moment. There is a much greater body of knowledge in the traditional areas that you haven't been exposed to yet, and we think it's useful to be exposed to that. I'll give you a minor example. So let's think of some, I don't know your names of your 3430s, etc., but let's think of the life insurance course where you say, my present value of the premiums equals my present value of the benefits type stuff. And in that course there, you were told that the commission was X, the expenses were Y, and the mortality is Z. You sort of get into the control cycle, you start to stand back from that a bit and thinking, well, why is that the answer? And when you go into the later courses, you have a much greater commercial understanding of those parameters type stuff. So if you're going down the traditional routes, it's very beneficial to stay in the route. If you're going down to the less traditional routes, I think the arguments are around becoming a part of a profession, taking your knowledge in a deeper way, benefiting from being a member of a profession that hosts lots of conferences, helps you learn to communicate with different people all the time, and pushes your knowledge forward type stuff. And it's more transferable to other organizations type stuff. So it depends where you want to take yourself, I think. And then when you hit the fellowship subjects, there are 3 of them. Two are what we call principle-based. So and what we mean by that, they're legislation agnostic. So we would teach you, if you take, say, the life insurance course, that's life insurance, the principles that you could go to any country in the world to progress that knowledge. The very final course, the one we call Module 3, is in applications. So that one in Australia will be heavily focused on the Australian environment. So in Australia, we have a body called APRA, which says a lot of things that actuaries have to do. So we'll take you through the rules and regulations in depth. And the education level increases as we go through those courses. Just a matter of few. You have about 13 choices as you go through. Okay. So the traditional ones are life insurance and retirement, or superannuation, as you might know it better. We've combined those courses. They're long-term things. The short-term things of general insurance and health are combined these days. You see this as alternative things. There's an investment course, which is really aimed for you to move into that superannuation space, well, either investment directly as a fund manager or asset consultant, or as an advisor to a superannuation fund. We do have an ERM course from the UK, but we're building our own enterprise risk management. We see this as a growth area for actuaries. So risk management, and you think a lot of insurance is essentially risk management. Insurance is the transfer of risk from an individual who cannot bear the variability in outcomes to an insurance company, and that's what you're studying here. Really, you're just saying that, you know, I'm willing to pay $1,000 premium for an expected benefit of $500. That's what we're doing, because there's expenses, profit on top. But the reality is, I'm willing to pay that $1,000 for my house insurance, because if my house burns down, I need $1 million to rebuild it. That's the swap that goes on. So that's fundamentally when you're doing your aggregation of many risks. You know, you come to your figures to work out the premiums. But the ERM takes it wider than the financial risk. It's more around strategic risk, operational risk, market risk, lots of different types of risk. We are introducing in a few weeks' time a data analytics applications subject. So you see the principle-based course in your fourth year here, and then in our studies we don't do a module 1 and module 2 principle-based one. You go straight into an applications one. It gives it a wider choice. We don't know how many people are going to take it. We'll find out in a few weeks' time. And finally, we've got a placeholder for banking, so I'll just leave that one for now. I won't go through the motivations of why we've changed. Historically, all our exams and material was done by a volunteer force of actuaries, so fellows who write the material. 3 years ago, we've changed the model, so we have 5 actuaries in-house that teach those 13 courses. This is a very, I'll go over this quickly, just to show you. Your foundation one in here, you tend to have well-defined problems. You're being asked to do things, and by well-defined, I don't mean they are analytically solvable, because you might use an approximation technique or simulation technique. But the problem itself is nice and well defined. You're told the premium's X, or determine the premium given Y type stuff. And as you go through the control cycle course introduces you to the general technique of how to solve any business problem. That's the thing of the control cycle. It's just basically saying, what am I being asked to do? Or understand the question. What's my possible approaches? And once I've done all that, how do I monitor it to know that it's actually solved the problem that I thought of in the first place? For anybody who's doing that course, you realize there's 2 things outside. A is the external environment, because we don't live in a vacuum. So our competitors force us to do something, the regulations force us to do things. And finally, there's a professionalism aspect. How do I operate as a professional? I mentioned the difference of opinion in the ALM one earlier on. And then we progress through, and in the old days, what we used to do, we'd throw at you, here is all the domain knowledge that a very experienced actuary knows. Here's some pretty complicated questions that would take about 15 years of experience to solve. You now have 3 hours to solve it in your exam. So we're moving away from that. That's why it used to be very, very painful when Julie and I did the exams. It was very tricky to do. We're not making the standard easier, we're just making it more relevant to people who are actually taking it. This is a bit. exactly. I did a maths degree, then a PhD in maths, and then went into a life insurance office. And the big difference is like I'm starting off with 6 other junior people. The year above me, there were 6 people, and the year above that, 6 people, all at different levels, and pay rises. So there was an incentive for doing it. You could see people who were doing, say, their 4th or 5th exam, and how the knowledge was built on earlier ones. So it wasn't when you come into university at 17, 18, and it's disjointed courses. You don't see the relationship. You can see the relationships more, and you were using the information in work. So, and it was different, right? Because we'd expect to do all the foundation studies in 1 year in work. Right? So it was a different world, but they throw a lot at you. I don't want to spend much time on this one, but this is Julia and I, we came from a world where we just this classical world where it was just known variables. We knew as actuaries what we wanted to be interested in. We knew that lapses was the important thing of interest. In your world of work, it's going to be very different. It's going to be a mixture of both of those approaches. And the bottom approach is really the new modern statistical. When I say modern statistical techniques developed in the 1930s rather than the ones we always in the 1910s. Okay, with the rise of the computer power, which has been going on a long time, nowadays, basically, the alternative of having many, many variables of interest is a possibility, right? So in your world of work, you're not going to be constrained like we were in our one. It's going to be a very different approach. And we're still working through the implications of getting that in your foundation studies. In terms of the assessment, I don't want to spend much on this, but just on the bottom line, that alignment one. We're very keen that, in a sense, we replicate what you're doing at university. When you're doing a university course, there's a well-defined syllabus. There's the lecturer, professor, or whatever, will have material, right? And they will assess you on that material that's aligned to the syllabus. In the profession itself, that didn't always happen. Right? So what I'm trying to say is the journey that you go on to in your post-university will be broadly similar to what you've done in university. So we've introduced tutorials, weekly tutorials. We've introduced homework. Not that anybody does that, right? I mean, but that's their own problem. Some do, some don't. The ones that do, surprisingly pass, but there we go. Maybe there's a correlation somewhere. Let's just skip through this quickly. This is, so at heart, in our world now, is the fact we don't regard you as a customer. Don't ever tell me you're a customer. We won't appreciate that at all. But we do envisage that at heart of what we're doing is we're trying to give you the experience and thinking about how you interact with the material. Okay? And so this is why we try to join up this triumvirate of the objectives, the exam, and the material. Everything we do is online. Okay? So we've been using Zoom for a few years, but the materials it's an online distance course. We do a variety of things. So we've invested some money in you use Moodle here, don't you? Similar thing, we use Canvas. It's a similar learning management system. But the concept is, we've set out a nice system for you where everything's electronically held, it's digital, there's PDFs, there's videos. This is Amanda, she's the lady who at the moment. But there's videos, there's quizzes, there's exercises. There's enough information in there to get you through to these. That's the thing. Anybody do mind maps? No? Ever heard of mind maps? Yeah? It's the only way I learn anyway. But so the other thing we do is historically we gave you a bunch of text and you had to figure out what was going on. So I'm very keen these days at the start of any chapter that we write, we give you a synopsis and overview of what's going on, trying to introduce as many pictures and different styles. People learn different ways. Okay? Some people I know, they just text only. Other people like spreadsheets. Other people like visualizations. We give you a breadth of ideas to help you. And again, we try to say to people, you need to, by now, you know your way of learning. We're sort of giving you a variety of tools and you select how best you learn. Again, that's just sort of just another point of detail about spreadsheets. Everything we do at the Actuaries Institute in terms of education, we try and map back to these principles. Now, the top one's important for you to understand, the concept of equivalence. We have a bunch of mutual recognition agreements with various actuarial bodies around the world. And that's important to you, because if you study with us and qualify as us, your certificate is portable to other jurisdictions. You can go to Europe, you can go to the UK, you can go to the States, or wherever you want to go. You can go to China, and you can use our qualification. Right? So the consequence of that, or the implications, we need to make sure that those newly qualified actuaries are of consistent level. So that's the fundamental principle to us. The mapping of subjects. So what we've done is, it's automatic for you in your foundation studies. You do your first year, second year, third year, and the lecturers set those courses appropriately. And when you come with us, we just make sure we continue that system. There's something called the Australian qualifications framework that sort of sets out a mapping. So we make sure that our courses are aligned appropriately. The third one, this aim. Every subject has an aim, which is like a marketing idea, 1 or 2 sentences. And underneath that, there's about 5 or 6 things that you'll physically be able to do as a consequence of the course. And we just make sure that the aim and those student outcomes and the detailed learning objectives are all aligned with each other. They're consistent. Okay? That sounds obvious, but it's a lot of work in making them consistent. Right, okay. Well, if you, let's say you've done your control cycle, you've done an honours degree, and you've passed your controls. I presume you mean post-university? Yeah. So you enter the world of work in the January time, you've got your foundation, your control cycle stuff, and you did those principles, and you decide to, in the first, you could do the CMP in that year. That's quite easily done. Some people would pick up a fellowship subject maybe in the second semester. Okay? So technically you could do it in 2 years, but on average it takes about 3, I think, somewhere around that level. Because people often don't, some people take a break, and then we don't have a 100% pass rate, so some people fail and take it again. What we're looking to do is, we will always get a tail. There are people out there who do the exams 10 times, 12 times, 15 times. Okay? There are still students my age. Right? There's very, very few of them, and they don't take the exams that often. But most of you will fail 1 exam, I would suspect. It'll be the biggest shock in your life. I remember in the AMP office, there's a young lady, she failed the first exam in her life. She was crying her eyes out in work. And that's not uncommon, because you got to phone your parents. Your parents know you as the brainiest people in the world. There's no one can touch you. Yeah? And you phone up, I failed an exam. It's awkward. But what we're doing, we're putting a lot of effort into giving you the information that, provided you come well prepared, you won't fail the exam. Right? So we're looking at, we don't have a tag, we don't have a mandated rate of passing, but we anticipate over time to get the pass rates to 50, 60% plus. Because there's always 10, 20% of people who say, if they pay for the exam and then they're not really ready, they're not doing the work on stuff. We would like to have a system where we cut them out, but no, we don't. Which gets to that, this concept of this well-prepared student should pass. So what we're saying to you, we will give you, it's the old adage, we take the horse to water, can't force you to drink. It's up to you. We'll give you enough hints and tips on what you can do. And if you follow our instructions, you should pass. We find what happens is the majority of you make the mistake when you're in the workforce, your boss tells you to do something and you've got to study. What do? Do you want to do the thing for your boss or the study? Okay? You do the thing for your boss all the time because you think that's what they want. Then you fail the exam and your boss says, why did you fail the exam? You said, well, because I've done that work for you. Well, you're supposed to pass your exams. Right? So remember, concentrate on getting rid of your exams. There are, and this is for, we really aim at, there's about 10% of you who will just fly through the exams. Okay? They just will. Yourselves, some of you are just like, intelligence is a log scale. Some of you are just so super quiet, you can just fly through anything. But the majority of us, like 70, 80% of the cohort, are about the same level. So it's about the effort we put in and how serious we take it. That's all. There's a whole bunch of stuff we do. I won't go into the assessments. It doesn't matter. I don't think you're ready for governance. Well, quickly on governance, it's important for you to understand Sorry, what's the question? All right, two questions to it. So, can you say it again? Because it's quite long. Yeah, yeah. Okay, good. Right. So, is the quality and complexity of knowledge required for these distance learning courses comparable with universities? Yes, directly comparable in the sense that we think the degree is at Australian Qualifications Framework Level 7. Your honours one is mapped to Level 8. Fellowship Module 3 is mapped to Level 9, which is the master's degree. The master's degree is proper use of the term rather than the marketing use. It's a repackaging of undergraduate material. And the modules 1 and 2 are pitched between the honours degree and the master's degree. So we're keen. When we look at that framework, you can actually visually see, yes, that actually describes what we're trying to do. So that's the one. In terms of is the quality, like I said, when I sat the distance learning courses, the quality was just read the textbook. Right? That was the thing. These days, as I showed you earlier on, with the one with the matter on there, we've got LMS, we've got discussion forums, you can raise questions, answer. We get weekly tutorials. It's a vastly different experience. It's much closer to the experience. Actually, it's very close to the experience many of you have at university these days. They're the ones that are, online type stuff. So we fundamentally believe we're making it. It's not to make. It's not to reduce standards. It's to keep standards the same, but just to align with more modern expectations. That's all. Given that the volume of people who want to come into the profession is higher, and that we've got good people coming in, and it doesn't make sense that we lose a lot of good people because we set them impossible. For example, a standard exam question used to be, you are the appointed actuary, write a board paper in the next 25 minutes. Okay? Now, in work, you'd be a junior analyst, probably maybe a senior analyst at that. In an organisation where we've asked a senior analyst to write a board paper in 5 weeks, let alone 20 minutes. So it just doesn't make from that way. That's the second question. What's the implications of distance education? I don't know. I mean, you've reached a stage by the time you leave in university, which you're more than capable to do self-study. We're making the courses such that you should pass the exams quicker than you would do if we just gave you the textbooks. So the implications are you should get through the exams quicker, you should get pay rises quicker, you should have a better understanding of the material, you should progress your career quicker. I suppose that's the implications.
One of the things about studying while working, you are actually working in an environment where you are working with real life and you're working with qualified people as well. So you learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
Distance, it doesn't matter if you're studying distance because right where you are, well, before COVID, but maybe in person, you are working with people who can learn.
Yeah, so Julie made the point there, you might not have heard for the people on the Zoom, that in the workforce, you naturally work with a wider bunch of people who will help you with your studies. And in general, the approach that we want from you is a business-minded approach in terms of answering questions. We don't want you to be dogmatic, this is the right answer. It's really standing back and arguing coherently with people and demonstrating that you do fundamentally understand the problem and you can communicate that in a simple, effective way. And they're the types of skills you pick up in the workforce. Very quickly on the governance, I won't spend more than a minute on this. We do a lot of education, just to let you know that within the profession itself, we have lots of checks and balances to make sure that the material is relevant to the workforce, that the examinations are of the right standards. For example, we don't mark the exams. 2 fellows of the Institute will mark every question. Well, lots of fellows, but per question, there's 2 independent fellows who mark it and add the results, make sure they can. And then it comes to us for quality control. We work with them. We've got something called an assessment committee. And so there's a whole bunch of checks and balances to make sure that when we've set the pass mark, that those above pass, those below fail. Oops. I give you this slide pack later. It just tells you where our members work. It's just more detail. The gender split. Look, I mean, I think it says 34% of members are female. Yeah, we've got a high proportion of students. About 40% of students are female. It's not too bad. I mean, there's maybe 50-50 is the right answer. I don't know. I think some things that happen is that the real world gets in the way of females in workforce, and that's not something we can. Working for me at the moment, the majority of people who work for me are females, and I'm in an unusual position. I started in 1990 to 2000. I probably had 4 or 5 managers. They were all female. And then I didn't have a manager for a while, so too senior, reported to the CEO. But now, back for the last 3 years, 4 years, I've been working with females managers. So for me, it's quite natural. And so I don't really understand the issues as much, but I'm on that. It's a very inclusive workplace. It's not too aggressive.
Right, the difference is my student, last year at Actuarial University, there were 10% females.
Yeah.
So things have changed.
Yeah.
And continue to change.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no, yeah, exactly. Just very quickly, yes, a large part of our focus at the Actuaries Institute is education. We run a lot of events, okay? We offer about 600 different types of continuing professional development each year. We're heavily involved in public policy, and we have something called, we organize ourselves by practice areas. And so we have lots of senior people in industry come into a practice committee, okay, to make sure that everybody underneath that pyramid understands what they need to understand. Just quickly, the university subscriber. I won't go through those. Something called a university subscriber on our website, the Actuaries Institute, actuaries.as.au. If you go in there, you can join us. Is anybody a university subscriber? 2, about 4 of you, 5-ish, 6, 7. If you join us as a university subscriber, it's free. It doesn't entitle you to take any of the exams, but you will get invites from something called, for example, the Young Actuaries program. They're hosting something in a few weeks' time where they're getting groups of 6 to 8 people to work together to mimic being on a board, to understand communication skills. And so there's those type of events. So I just advise you to just join. It's free. That's pretty much it from me. Any questions or more questions? Yes.
The first one is, how do we break into the specific and what's experience in other places?
All right. So how did you get into the profession? What's my experience? Now, I'm obviously much older than the audience, and when I was in university, I'd never heard of actuaries until I was in my honours year, and people were disappearing to become actuaries. I was going off to do a PhD anyway, and then I decided to do this career. At the time, there was a career book called The Ivanhoe Guide to Actuaries. In the UK, that was, and described. And I'm sort of a bit ashamed to tell it, but it doesn't matter. I figured out, I got a map of the town I was in, Bristol, and I knew where I lived, and I got a piece of string, and I drew to the nearest office, life insurance office, and I wrote to them. They gave me a job. The most important thing I remembered was to keep my feet on the floor, because I had holes in my shoes with a bit of cardboard at the time. And that's how I got in. And they asked me a question, why do I want to be an actuary? And I regurgitated what was on the forefront of the Ivanhoe's Guide, which was the Institute of Actuaries Presidential Address, a summary, who turned out to be the managing director of that firm, and the person who interviewed me didn't recognise it. So that's my bit of luck of getting it. It's a very, very different world. We didn't have presentation skills. We weren't, there's no way where we anything like it. I feel really sorry for you. It's so competitive these days, you know. What I would suggest is, yes, get the usual. Think about what does the employer want from you when you walk into that. Okay? What they want is, can I work with you? Right? Can you listen to what I'm saying? That's what they're asking. So if you go in there, I've got an IQ of 175, I'm the best student ever, I can take over your thing in a year, they're not going to listen to you. It really is sitting down, having a nice chat with somebody. The control cycle is actually quite useful for your interview range. If you go into the, you know, the big four, that they do all these things, you get 20 students in a room, wide variety, and they ask you to think about problems. So don't be dogmatic, sit back, think of the problem, be open-minded, and just be nice and clear in your answer. That's how I would give some advice to anybody. Okay, so how does your education relate to the real world? It's actually closer than you realise, I think. Not the sort of, there's some topics that are obviously not real. For example, ruin. You know, you sat down and your lecturer, Dan, I think, is doing ruin theory and saying, let's wait an infinite amount of time before something happens. You know, you're not going to do that. That doesn't make any sense. But the underlying principles of it is like the concept of, well, if I've got assets like in excess of liabilities, I've got some solvency, you know, what can I do? Now, some of the education stuff is a constrained problem. It's a well-defined problem trying to think about, if this happened, when do I run out of money? In the real world, what happens is, well, you just change your mind. You know, you get some more money type stuff. But the underlying principles are actually quite useful. Part 2 exemptions before Part 1. Look, it's possible to do it because you could do the Part 2 courses. Well, I don't call them Part 2 anymore. We call them Actuary. You can do them on a non-award basis at university. So technically, you could do your Part 2, Actuary, the ones before your foundation ones. That's technically true. The Actuary one will assume knowledge of the foundation, not the detail of it. Okay, because I could go into industry now, and I could tell you now, if I asked out of 100 actuaries over the age 35, if I asked them to say what the Kaplan-Meier estimate is, they'd be like, what? No idea what you're talking about, because that's such a level of detailed knowledge. You don't know that. It's the principles, the fact that the principle of correspondence, where you've balanced your premiums and expenses and benefits, that overarching principle will be carried forward into your and I'd like to add something else. The control cycle questions, a lot of them you can give to people who are not actuaries but got business experience, and they'll see the issue straight away in lots of them. Not the detailed technical ones, I think evaluation. The ones who've got business issues, it's usually it's not that tricky. It's just tricky from your end because you haven't had that business experience to put in. Does your exemption expire? I think you get your exemptions from, say, Monash, and then you have about 3 years or so to join the institute and get your exemption. Is that the rule? Once you've got them, that's it. They don't expire, provided you pay your fees to us. Give us the money, and we won't forget you. Right. Yeah. And the new stones. Yeah. Okay.
What do you have to say to people who struggle
So the question there is, there's an implicit assumption that people are very smart. What do you say to people who are having? Yeah. The smartest business person I've worked for never went to university. He didn't go. He left and he reached sales and he went up that route. And there's something called Solvency II in Europe, which took many, many years for people to understand what to do. And I remember him summarizing it in 2 sentences. Right? So technically, he's not the smartest person in the world in terms of that, in terms of where you can do some complicated equation. What he was very good at was that skill set of listening and re-expressing in simple language. And you'll find in the workforce, the smartest people you work with, the sort of senior actuaries and other people, they're very capable of expressing problems very simply. So that's the acid test about smartness. So don't get confused about, sometimes you might struggle with some of the mathematics involved. And the best person I taught on the control cycle, she didn't do too well in the foundation subjects. When I saw the control cycle stuff, I thought, oh, this is fantastic. If you get the opportunity to demonstrate what you can do in the workforce, you're going to do really well. Right? It's, we would like to think about making the, being much more inclusive and somehow getting more people involved in actuarial that don't have those math skills, because we sort of set a barrier, if you like. As you go through the later subjects, it's not really the maths, it's the storytelling. It's what's important. Okay. Any questions from the floor? Yeah. So that one is the guy in the audience has done some courses that's got the exemption level. And when can you apply for your exemptions? Is your question? Yeah, I think you can talk to Julie about the details of that. I think that's something at the end. Once you're formally awarded those units, you have a transcript, and is that transcript then you can take to Julie and you can sign as the nominated accredited actuary. You send that to the Actuaries Institute, and then Alan and Nancy will give you the appropriate exemptions. Yeah. I didn't quite catch the question. We're going to, if you go through Monash and you get the exemption, we're doing that for a long time before we.
So it does be that IFOA, so there's been change how IFOA used to accept Australian exemptions, and now there's a different process. It doesn't mean that they don't, but it's a different process to go through, but they'll assess. Oh, yes, sorry. So the IFOA have changed their processes. So it's not automatic you get the exemption, but I think if you demonstrate the process, there's a bunch of rules to go through. It's not impossible to do it, and it's not exceptionally hard if they've just defined a set of rules to go through. Yeah, yeah. There's a question at the back. The question there is, how is sort of AI going to impact you guys over your working lifetime? And also, is there any of the underlying skills going to change over time? Is that a fair assessment of the question? Look, AI is probably at a lower level than it's popularly perceived at. Okay, and I've seen about 3 years ago, there's this big thing where actuaries were going up and other professionals, and they'd say, I'd wake up in the morning and my report would be prepared by the machine, and I would just give the advice. To which some people in the audience, your age, well, not your age as is, would say, well, that's fascinating, but given it takes about 15 years of real life experience to get to that level, what is the opportunities for me? And I think that's the real question: is we need humans in the workforce, and we're always going to need humans in the workforce for a long time to be able to
build on their experience to get to that senior position. Okay? And if somebody continues it, well, ultimately the robots to do that, and say, well, that's great, then we just have universal benefits somehow. It's a different world. Can't really imagine how that works. In terms of your question around the underlying principles, I'm not well, I had the one side with that classical and the modern one. What I think the paradigm shift that's going on at the moment is to make sure that you're exposed to a more modern way of solving problems, which is not to try and find an analytical closed form solution to a problem, in terms of a sine function, cosine function, or whatever, or a special function if you like. Is more of a case of a simulation technique and approximation techniques will take precedence, because the stuff you learn in university, at heart, there's principles going under there. Sometimes we test you too much applying it to, this is why the normal distribution is so endemic. It's nice and easy to use. Rather than, if you think of what's a probability function, a mapping from 0 to 1, okay? There's an uncountable infinite number of them that satisfy the axioms of probability. We just ask you to do the normal, the gamma, the beta, the quadrant or something. And we restrict it because it's practicable to give you some understanding, some application of that theory. But in your lifetime, you will be, and you see in workplace now, you'll just be using simulation techniques more. So you'll still be regression analysis type stuff, that'll be driving it, but it'll just be more and more. What you will see is more of a, what we call a black box approach to things. So that all these different techniques will be embedded in the box and the outputs. Right? For using Actuary, we'll be able to add a lot of value by having a sort of broad understanding of what's going on. Yeah. Your first year. So first year, what's the quickest way to get into the workforce? Sorry, I'm a very sarcastic person. Just quit university and sorry, but that's really answer, so I'll take that back. Your first year question is: once you go through your degree and you do really well in your degree, how do you get into work? And of course, at Monash, it's a well-respected institution. When there's going to be a whole bunch, there's going to be many people like you looking for jobs, and as I mentioned earlier, it's applying for that. Get into that interview stage, being personable, because there'll be many people with similar qualifications to you. Just getting them, learning how to interact with people, and that's what will get you in the door and get you on. Join us, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, network employers.
Coming up next after the break, we have corporate cocktails event. We great way to experience that network experience of people in the industry and the food is a nice for networking. So if you want to practice those skills,
Okay, I just repeat that for people on the Zoom call. Julie mentioned the fact that a good example to expand your softer skills is to join mass and do the socializing around there. And one of the mass members there mentioned that after your break, there's a corporate cocktails. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so what are the ones? That's a good question. Go on as a university subscriber. I think you'll get access to a lot of the insight sessions that happen. Okay, so some of them might not be quite relevant to you, that might be a bit too advanced. But if you went onto that page, you can search by practice area, and you can sort of get a flavour of all the type of work that goes on. And like I said, we tend to produce about 600, 650 CPD items a year. Actually, I looked on the other day on the events page. They now have the past events on there. So you can do that. There's lots of other things you can join the IFOA one and lots of Google type stuff. But there's more than sufficient to get you going. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, the Actuaries Institute, we're the sort of headquarters, so we represent the membership. We're a member-led body. So what we try to do is facilitate discussions with other people. For example, there are a lot of actuaries in the banking sector. So what we'll try and do is we're trying to create a framework for those actuaries to get together to discuss common problems, to understand what's going on in the industry. So we facilitate things. So we can't go to an employer and say, we think you need an actuary. What we will be doing is getting marketing materials together to test those ones. There was a campaign about a year or 2 years ago, the See What We Can See campaign, which led to adverts on the financial press, go into non-traditional employers, but what actuaries can do. But it's largely, I think it's driven from a sort of grassroots level. Some actuaries who are successful in other areas getting in there, bringing in actuaries because they know the skill sets they bring, and then convincing the wider audience, the area they're in, to recruit them. Quantium pulls in lots of people, not just actuaries, data science, but it is an area that, you know, people didn't think about 20 years ago. But some bright actuary did and went and set up a business. A very Yeah, so Julie mentioned the fact that actuaries are now in-house because of the skills they can bring to the business. You've got Andrew Matthews, good example there, and the lecturers here. But also APRA's recognised that by making statutory positions. Our aim is not to make statutory positions so we can grab a mark and that's how it's statutory one. We just want people to realise and bring good skill sets. For example, there's lots of social services now are bringing in actuaries because we've got some good skill sets of marrying different data sets where a statistician might say, you can't really add that, yes, apples and oranges, but we're saying, well, hang on a minute, this is the underlying assumptions, you can do this, you can help advise on what's going on. So it's lots of opportunities. Yeah. Cool.